So okay, we've decided to go ahead and build a PC. Okay, what needs to be in it? Since I was going through the trouble of building this, I wanted to make it expandable. And we'll go through the details of all these parts, and I'll actually put a link for the parts list that I used for this computer in the comments. And this video, we're just putting it all together into a PC as I sped the video up times 8. And we start building this PC from scratch. I mean, we're basically pulling the motherboard and the CPUs out of their boxes. Then we plugged in our quad server boards. The new PC we built, the BIOS overview, BIOS power settings and boot order, overclocking the SD-RAM memory, installing Windows 10 Pro, and disabling the Windows 10 automatic update with reboot. Well, today we're going to be installing VMware Workstation 14 in the server that we built, and we're going to do some initial config. The Windows 10 regedit, and we're going to change the friendly name of our port adapters in the device manager to match the physical ports that are on the quad cards that are in the server. Then we're going to copy a virtual machine from VMware's Workstation 12. Then we're going to add a virtual network for our Dallas test bed. Welcome to the Network Engineering video blog. I'm your host, Michael Crane. Well, today we're going to create some virtual machines in VMware, and I put together a montage of previously on the episodes leading up to this video. So this video has like 4 or 5 other videos before it where we bought the parts for the server, we assembled the server, and we set up the BIOS, installed Windows 10, and then configured, installed VMware 14, Workstation 14, and configured our virtual network. And I refer to a lot of these videos, the previous videos in this blog, and I wanted to kind of give you an idea or something to reference back to, so you could watch the previous videos. Usually I just plug in the little blurb of text during the video to reference you back to the video I'm referring to, the previous episode. But I thought the montage at the front would be easier to look at and kind of get all the previous videos all in one time. So let me know if that helps. Leave a comment, and that'll help if you like it or don't like it, and let me know, okay? So today we're going to be creating some virtual machines in our VMware Workstation 14. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a virtual machine from a DVD. And I'm just going to use that Windows 10 Pro DVD that I used in a previous blog to build the lab VM server. So we're just going to reuse that DVD since we already have it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to download an ISO file from the Ubuntu website, and we're going to install that. Excuse me. So we're going to download that Ubuntu ISO file and then create a virtual machine using an ISO downloaded from the internet. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to To create a virtual machine from an OVF or an OVA, we first have to get an OVF. So what we're going to do is we're going to export an OVF from VMware, and then modify the OVF and import the modified OVF file, or we'll import it / create a virtual machine from that modified OVF file. So, and we're going to take a pretty good look at the OVF file itself. Hopefully it's not too long, but I thought it was kind of interesting, so I dug into a little bit, and we'll spend a good 10-15 minutes looking at the OVF file itself. So that's not really creating a virtual machine. This video probably could have been a little shorter without that, but I thought it was interesting, and let me know if you want to see more about OVF creation and modification, and because there's quite a lot to do and quite a lot that you can accomplish with an OVF file, especially when it comes to automating deployments. So let me know in the comments. So anyway, let's get started. Okay, so I am remote desktop into the lab VM server, and I've got the VMware workstation GUI pulled up here. All right. The first thing I want to start on today is we'll create a Windows 10 Pro virtual machine real quick. So let's go ahead and get started. So, okay, so we're at the workstation 14 GUI here. I'm just going to click on create a new virtual machine. And I usually use the typical. I don't think I've ever had to use the custom. Maybe I have and I don't remember. But for our video today, we're going to use typical. We're going to be using a DVD. So this is kind of nice. It automatically selects it for you, and now it's asking me to insert the installer disk. So I'm going to go do that. I'll be right back. And I am just installing this DVD into the PC's DVD drive. In other words, I'm inserting the installer disk in the PC's DVD drive. There's not a separate DVD drive just for VMware Workstation. So I just wanted to make that clear. Okay, so I've installed it, or inserted the DVD installer disk into it, but as you notice, it hasn't detected it. And I ran into this earlier when I was doing a dry run of this video. And so all I had to do is hit the back arrow and then hit next. And now it's went and read the disk. It found the Windows 10 x64 detected. And it says this operating system will use the easy install. And I haven't clicked on and read about this, but it is pretty easy, as you'll see. So I'm just going to let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and hit next, and I'm going to leave everything in here blank, except we're installing Windows 10 Pro, and I'm not exactly sure if all these additions are on that one DVD, but I don't know. Maybe they're in VMware. Who knows? So anyway, we want Windows 10 Pro. And we're going to hit next. And it's just asking about a product key. I don't have a product key for it. The one I've used is already being used. Or the one I have is already being used. But this is just for demo anyway. We can still create the virtual machine. It'll come up and run without any problems. But it'll start bugging you about having a product key. And so anyway, let's just move forward here. Okay. I'm going to change the name of this to Windows 10 VM. Okay. And we want it in this location right there, so that's good. Max disk size 60 gigs, fine. I'm just gonna, I always put everything into a single virtual disk. To me, it seems to run a little faster. So, and I think they actually say that down here or something like that. Okay. Okay, so let's look at what we've got here. Windows 10 VMs, that's the location, that's good. Operating systems, Windows 10, 60 gig hard drive, 2 gig of memory. That's probably a little bit thin for Windows 10. And here's some other junk it's going to install with it. So yeah, we want to bump this memory up a little bit. So we're going to go to Customize Hardware. And yeah, let's give them, oh, I don't know, Windows 10, maybe 8 gig. Okay. So, yeah, okay. Oops. So now we've got this guy to 8 gig. All right. And yeah, one CPU is probably a little thin for him as well. So we'll give him a couple CPUs and with 4 cores each. So I'll give a total of 8 cores. But I'm not going to turn on any of this virtualization stuff. This stuff does help, and you have to kind of read about it, and it's got to be turned on in the BIOS and all that other fun stuff. In fact, I think it is for this guy right here. I'm not too sure about these two. I'd have to look it up, but for today's video, we'll just leave them blank. The DVD drive, it says connect at power on. This might cause some problems with other virtual machines. I don't know. We might have to come back later and uncheck him. I seem to remember in the back of my mind having problems with this, but that was several years ago, and maybe it's fixed now. The network adapter, we do want to connect at power on for sure, and we're going to move this to our custom, our virtual network we created in a previous video. So, okay, so we want it on the Dallas net, our custom network. Then really all the rest of the stuff we're just going to leave defaulted. I don't see any reason to change any of that right now. Now, if you wanted, you can also add more hardware. So if you just click on add, we could, and what's very common is to add multiple network adapters, right? Because a lot of computers have more than one Ethernet port in there. So we could add another network adapter, and it's basically the same setup. So we could have one network adapter going to our Dallas network, our virtual network, and then we could have the other one going to VMnet 0, which would be to the outside world if you want to do something like that. But we're not going to do that. So I'm going to remove this guy. So let's see, we'll go ahead and close this guy and review them real quick. 8 CPU cores, DVD, USB, printer, sound card, and the network adapter's right. Windows will appreciate 8 gigs. And you can leave this power on, this virtual machine, after creation. And what that does is, once it creates it, it's going to try to install the Windows 10 software, and it'll reboot a few times. And if you don't have this turned on, this checked, it will not reboot for you. It'll just stay off. So we're going to leave this checked and click Finish. And we're going to let her rip. And it looks like it is done. So, you have to admit, that was pretty easy. And I didn't type in anything. No annoying prompts. Nothing. It installed it all by itself. So I would call VMware's easy install pretty darn easy. Okay, so at this point, we're not going to do any more configuration on the Windows 10 Pro. This is basically just going in the operating system and using it. So I'll go ahead and shut it down. As you can see, it has no network connectivity. And there's probably a bunch of other stuff that needs to be configured in here, like a username and password. As you can see, it didn't even prompt me for a username and password because we didn't set one. So, and you don't really want to leave your Windows machine like that. And usually when I set up a Windows virtual machine, I usually set them up for a remote desktop, and then I use the remote desktop client to remote desktop into it. And that makes it pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this down. Okay. And that's about it for that. That's pretty straightforward. Okay, so the next thing on the list is I want to install Ubuntu. All right. Went to the Ubuntu webpage and I just downloaded the Ubuntu desktop. Nothing special. I've already put it in our lab VM here. It's under ISOs. Okay. And this is it right here. So, but this is the disk image file, and it's quite large, I believe. It's 1.8 gig. All right. So I just put it under our ISO directory, and by the way, here's where I store the VMs. Here's our Windows 10 VM. We can go take a look at it real quick. And here's our disk. Let me widen this up a little bit. Looks like it's about 10 gig, even though we set it to 60, and that's because it will expand this file as we start using disk space in the virtual machine. All right, and I'm not going to go through all this other stuff. Here's a log file you can look at, but this video is not about that. This video is about installing virtual machines. Okay, so go back to our home directory here. We're going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to use typical again. And this time we're going to select the installer disk image ISO. Okay, and I'm just going to browse there. I'm going to select our Ubuntu desktop ISO. All right, open, and we're going to click next. So I am going to add some stuff here. I'm just going to call it NEV blog, NEV blog, NEV blog, NEV blog. Oops, I think I got that right. All right, let's rename him to, I don't know. How about Ubuntu VM? All right, he's going to put him in our VMs directory. That's good. We're going to leave his disk size at 20 gig. We're going to store it as a single file. All right, let's review him. So this is all good. Yeah, this memory is a little bit small, and we want to also change our network adapter again. Okay, so we're going to click on Customize Hardware. Let's go ahead and Ubuntu doesn't need a lot, but let's just give him 4 gig. All right, I'll give him a, I don't know. Well, we can leave it at 1 processor with maybe 2 cores. It doesn't need a lot, and well, that should be okay. We're going to change our network adapter back to our custom Dallas net. All right, and all the rest of the stuff we're just going to remain. Is going to leave the same. Okay, and we'll close this. We want to power it on after it's created. Finish. And now it's going to install. Okay, and it's done installing. That was pretty simple and pretty fast. Okay, so again, I'm not going to do a lot with this Ubuntu VM right now. The reason why I added the username and password and all this is when I was doing the dry run of this video, I tried leaving that blank and Ubuntu wouldn't have anything to do with it. So I found putting it in helps. And I guess the reason why is it doesn't have a root password, and without a username, it can't log in. Or it won't log in. Because it doesn't have a user account to log into, and since root's not enabled, it had nothing to log into. So NEV blog is our password. Sign in. All right. And yeah, so I'm not going to get into setting this up right now. That'll be another video. Let's go get in here and scroll down. Let's open up a terminal. Sudo su root. Okay. NEV blog. Okay, and we'll just shut it down. Well, very good. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on today is or importing OVF template, if you will. Okay, and I have the somewhere here. Okay, so this is the let me scroll up here a little bit. This is the spec for it is in the Distributed Management Task Force, which is DMTF, and OVF is open virtual format, and it's basically XML. It's a file format, and you can read this. Just go to www.dmtf.org and you can read away. There's also another one which is called OVA, which is Open Virtual Appliance, and that's just a tar file of all the files. So what I'm going to do, let me close this down for a second, is I'm going to export this template right here as an OVF. So to do it, you just highlight template, and this template is a CentOS template that we copied and pasted over. I guess we could do the Ubuntu if you wanted, but it really doesn't matter. Well, let's just do the Ubuntu one. When I was doing the dry run, I did template, but we'll do the Ubuntu one, see what happens. So you just highlight it, go to File, Export to OVF, and I'm going to go ahead and create a directory real quick. We'll call this OVF. All right. And we're just going to export them into this directory here, because it's going to export three or four files. Okay, so it's done exporting. Let's take a look at what it did. Okay, so we'll go into the OVF directory here, and it did 3 files. The OVF file is the main descriptor file. All right. The .mf file is the manifest file, and the VMDK is the virtual disk, virtual machine disk, I think is what it stands for. All right, and you notice it's only like 2 gig, which is pretty good, or smaller. It's a lot smaller than 20 gig, which we originally set it at. Okay, so we can take a real quick look at some of these files. We won't look at the disk, it's a kind of binary. But we can look at the manifest, and the OVF file is a real interesting one. So I'm going to right click on it and edit it with Notepad. Here you can see it's just a checksum of these 2 other files, right? All right. So I'm just going to shrink him down real. We can edit this .ovf file I'm using Notepad++, and it works okay. It's you can edit stuff using Notepad++, but there's a editor that Microsoft makes for editing XML files, and it's called XML Notepad. And so to edit it, though, I'm going to change the name of this guy real quick. I'm going to put .xml suffix on him. All right. Now I'm going to right click on him, and I'm going to edit him with XML Notepad. All right. And this has a much nicer layout, at least for me. All right, so let's take a look at this OVF file real quick, and this kind of shows you that it's pretty much XML, right? Okay, so let's take a quick look at what's all in here. So, envelope is the top level element, and these guys here are the namespace prefixes. All right, so you got .ovf, which is the top level schema data. This RASD is a resource allocation settings data. VSSD is a virtual system settings data. This is the VMware data. And this SIM is a common information model, and you can go read about some of this stuff. I don't remember what XSI is. I didn't look it up, but you can. Next is the references, and really it should say file references, but I guess you can reference other things in there, but mainly it's for files. And the file that we're referencing in our setup here is the virtual machine disk. So we've got the href, the OVF reference ID. So what this does, it points to physical files. And I guess you could use a URL in here if you wanted to grab something over the internet, right? And so this is the real file name that's on the disk, right? And we're going to give it an ID of file 1, and this is its size. And it says it's, I don't know what size that is. I'm guessing that's supposed to be 20 20 gig, but it doesn't seem to match up. So I'm not exactly sure how they calculated that. Okay, so the next section, I'll close the references, is the disk section. And this is just the virtual disk information. And this is where you kind of spec out a bunch of hard drives. And you do this because you can build multiple VMs with one OVF file. And they might all use the same size disk. It's kind of like if you buy 5 PCs that have 20 gig hard drives in them, right? And so you don't want to keep having to specify all this information over and over again in your virtual systems, which we'll get to in a second. All right. So it just says, okay, capacity. This is a weird allocation thing, but it's 2 to the 30, which is 20 times 2 to the 30, which I know just from what we provisioned is in gigabytes. And we're giving it the idea of VM disk 1. And that's how we're going to reference it down here in the virtual system. It also has a file reference, which is how we're referencing it back here. Right? Remember file 1? So this maps this to here in our physical file reference. Here's the format, and the populated size is unknown. I don't know what that number is. I'd have to look that up. So okay, and then let's go down to network. We didn't really provision anything in the network. Nothing real exciting here. It just says custom. So when we create this virtual machine, we'll probably have to go specify it again in VMware Workstation. And then the virtual system is basically everything else. It's the virtual machine. Its idea is, it says it right here, a virtual machine. Okay. Its name is Ubuntu VM. And then it's got the operating system. Here's its ID, and it's just a kind of installed guest operating system. And remember, this was all generated up here by VMware's OVF tool. Okay, so let's see what else we've got here. The name is Ubuntu VM. All right. Let's see. The operating system we're using is Ubuntu 64 guest, and you can see that's VMware popped that in there. And the kind of installed guest operating system, well, that's pretty informative. All right, okay, so here's where all the goodies are. And wonder if I should just open them all up. We can look at them one at a time. So okay, we'll just look at the system. Virtual instance ID is 0. A virtual system identifier is Ubuntu VM. Virtual system type is VMX14, which I'm guessing is the Workstation 14 info. All right, and okay. All right, so this looks like a CPU. Yep, 2 virtual CPUs. Here it goes. Number of virtual CPUs. All right. And it'd be nice if they allowed you to put comments in these. I've ran into this before, and you can add a comment, but it still hides it under item. And it makes it kind of hard. But anyway, so resource type is 3. I'd have to look. I don't remember exactly what that is. I guess just a CPU. There's 2 CPUs, instance ID 1, and element name is 2 virtual CPUs. All right. Let's see. Next item. Okay, is specifying the memory. All right. 4 gigs of memory. Okay, this is the controller. a USB controller. Oh, this is a SATA controller, USB controller, SCSI, a floppy drive, oh, a serial port. Let's see, where are we at? Sound card. Anyway, you kind of get the idea. There's a bunch of junk in here. Basically, what this file does, don't let it confuse you. You can make a OVF file with a lot of this stuff gone or not included. CD-ROM. Anyway, I don't see anything. Oh, here's our Ethernet. It's using Ethernet 0. All right. It's an E1000 type. That's kind of interesting. So, it's interesting if you can actually copying and paste these guys, and then you add a deployment model where you can create multiple virtual machines with just this one OVF file, and that's why it's so, and they'll be almost identical, right? Except you can say, well, okay, I want one to have 2 CPUs and maybe another one, and you change its deployment option, and it will have maybe 4 virtual CPUs. And so usually when you're creating multiple virtual machines, say like you're building a cluster to run different applications, you might have a mail server that doesn't need a whole lot of horsepower, and then a customer-facing web server that needs all kinds of horsepower. And you can build this cluster using this one OVF file. And if you want to read on how to modify this, you can go back to the spec. If I can find it, here we go. And click on the specification that you want to use. And so you got to dig around and look for it in this in the standards published documents, and you look for the open virtualization format specification, and or the OVF, and you can see it's got 2.0 and 1.0 specifications for it, right? Oh, here we go. So there's several of them, and to find out, I didn't point this out earlier, and to figure out which one you're using, you go back up here and see this envelope where it says 1. That is the DMTF envelope it's using, or the specification. So it's 1. You can just go to latest one, which is this guy right here, 1.1.1. Open them up, and then you can come down here and read all about it. So we got envelope elements, and let's see, where are we? Okay, so here's the namespace prefixes we were talking about earlier. Envelope 1, and then you can come down here and it'll tell you what all these elements are. The file reference, how to provision them, and all the other information that you need to build this OVF file. So you might be thinking to yourself, wow, that's a lot of work, right? I mean, you can just come up here to and click on the Ubuntu VM. You can come up to VM manage and then clone, and just clone the virtual machine. And that's true if you're just going to do one. But if you want to automate, or let's say you need to build a bunch of different VMs for a deployment, you know, let's say 5 or 6, and you're going to be deploying them at a bunch of different sites, this is the way to use the OVFs to automate that process. Okay, so let's make some quick changes to our OVF file and we'll import it again. So we'll leave this the same. Basically, let's just change the virtual system name. So we'll change it to Ubuntu VM 2. Whoops. Ubuntu VM 2. All right. And let's see. I'm going to do a find here. Ubuntu VM. Let's see how many instances of that are floating around. Okay. There's one. We'll add a 2 to him. Find next. Ubuntu VM 2. Find next. Uh-oh. So now it's asking to change the disk name. Let's go ahead and do that. Why not? I'll change them to, see what happens. Find next. Okay, so it's found them all. All right. Let's go ahead and save that. And so we've changed the name of this VM2 disk. So we need to change him in the file here. So we'll go up here, just rename him to 2. All right. And we might as well rename the rest of these guys. Let me close this XML file here. Name him to 2. And we might as well rename him to 2. Okay. Let's see. All right. So yeah, let's see what happens when we try to import him. So to import, unfortunately, he doesn't have an import. I don't know why, but you have to use open. All right. So, it can't find the OVF file because it has a .xml. Suffix on them. All right. Let's try that again. File open. Okay, there's our Ubuntu VM2 OVF. Open them. Okay, so it's asking name for the new virtual machine, storage path, import. And, well, there we go. There he is. Well, let's see if he works. Well, looks like it's working. NEV blog. Excellent. Well, there you go. So you've just created a VM using an OVF file that was modified from another OVF file. So you can see the power in editing those OVF files can be, at first it's going to be a little, confusing with some of the fields the way they are. But if you're going to automate it, that is definitely the way to go. So I'm just going to right click on him and power him off. All right. So that's about it. If you'd like to see more about editing and modifying OVF files, let me know in the questions or comments underneath the video. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any other questions or comments, leave them in the comments under the video, and I'll see you next time.